Hello, everyone. I'm Professor McCoy, and welcome back to another hopefully interesting conversation. Once again, talking about Charlie Kirk, his tragic assassination, as well as some interesting topics that it brings up. And if you're watching this on my channel, then you'll see a new face. That is Len. So there. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, go on ahead.
So my name is Len. I'm a Catholic and libertarian as well. I am a I am the one of the moderators at the Libertarian Catholic Social. I'm a assistant volunteer at my parish's religious education, and yeah, I'm glad to be here.
And Philip, familiar
Great.
face.
And hello, friends. Joined again by Professor Vincent McCoy and my friend Len. And we're here to, again, follow up on our last conversation about Charlie Kirk and his assassination and some of the ramifications in the culture of that, as well as some of the doctrinal and just interesting religious and philosophical questions that come out of that and around that. So here we are. Who wants to start off?
All right. Well, I know the first thing we wanted to talk about was Charlie himself, and what is, at least from our perspective as Catholics, what might be the state of his soul, and what factors might contribute to what we can know about that. And I want to begin by saying I'm probably the most uncertain and persuadable of the three of us here on the matter. I tend to be on matters, at least of human immortality. I tend to be very I don't know, intellectually humble, if you don't mind my hubris in saying so. um I say human immortality because I do take the very strong Thomist position on animal mortality, but that's a topic for another day. But
Yeah.
I do think, yeah, um I do think that I am fundamentally unsure about Charlie's eternal destiny. I know what I would like to think. I know what I would like to be true. But I'm perfectly well open to being convinced. So, what do you guys think?
We definitely should one day have a conversation on animal mortality, because I am
Yeah.
very strongly in the camp of animal afterlife being a thing.
Oh.
Not 100%. Yeah, it's one of the things we can't say 100%, but that'd be a
Well,
fun topic.
well,
But
I really hope you're
so
right.
just to put that as an
So,
aside for let's bookmark that over here, because
writing this down.
future fun conversation. But yeah, I'm in the camp that Charlie Kirk was a martyr. And I'm also in the camp that he could be declared by the Catholic Church a saint. Now, I would say that's a very different question from whether or not he will be declared a saint, which is almost certainly not. But we have no canon law that says a non-Catholic cannot be a saint, and definitely no doctrine that the non-Catholic cannot be a saint. If there was a canon law, that wouldn't change it, because the Pope writes canon law and the Pope declares saints, and the Pope can change canon law to make someone a saint. But we also have precedent. There are several non-Catholic saints already. Pope Francis declared one Armenian Orthodox a saint during his time, and I think three Ethiopian martyrs during his pontificate. So we do have God bless you. We do have
Thank you.
precedent for non-Catholic saints already. Now, there is no precedent for Protestant saints, and I think Protestants are much less likely even still, because they're so far estranged from historic Christianity and apostolic Christianity. They're in a very, very different um, place from the Eastern and Ethiopian and Armenian Orthodox, who are basically Catholics on all but one or two issues each. Like, it's not like they're estranged on 90% of with Catholics, or a lot, a whole lot like Protestants are. They're very close to us,
They have
minus
also,
the Pope, basically.
they at least presumably have valid sacraments as well, and that may make
Yeah,
a significant difference.
yeah. Their sacraments are as valid as ours. They have legitimate bishops, legitimate dioceses, or eparchies, they might call them. They have all seven sacraments are fully legitimate, and even their saints are recognized in the church if a Ethiopian Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox or an Eastern Orthodox wants to come home to the Catholic faith. and they bring their parish with them, they get all the same saints on their calendar days. That's why we have Saint Nestorian on the Oriental
Wait,
Orthodox.
really?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Saint Nestorius is recognized by the now. Keep in mind,
Mhm.
just like with Western canonizations, Eastern canonizations are not infallible. The Church nowhere teaches that any canonization is infallible. So,
Wait,
and this would be a fun topic as well.
are you sure about that? 'Cause
Oh yeah.
it has been my understanding that that is part of the infallible magisterium of the church. The canonizations are, at
Well,
least.
um, so this. I'm glad we got to
Hmm.
this. Actually, this is interesting.
Okay, go
So for one, let's break this down to two categories. Um, on the left we have Eastern saints. Now Eastern saints are um, basically folk saints when they come home to the Catholic Church. So someone like Saint
Okay.
Nestorian, for an Oriental Orthodox who comes home to the church, and they have their liturgical calendar, or Saint Gregory of Palamas will be a good example for an Eastern Orthodox.
Oh, I see.
These are
Yeah,
people
yeah.
who
Go ahead.
who would be saints on their liturgical calendar. They keep their liturgical calendar when they come home to the Catholic Church. So
Mhm.
if you're going to a Byzantine or an Oriental church, you're going to get all the saints that you would have in a Western or an Eastern Rite Catholic church. So they'll have a feast day for Saint Nestorius. They'll have a feast day for Saint Gregory of Palamas,
Mhm.
and the church is totally fine with them venerating those people as saints and has not condemned it, and specifically explicitly allows it. Um,
Okay.
but they have not been declared such by the Pope. So then over here on the right, we have Western canonized saints, which are to a different degree, they have actually been formally canonized by a Pope. Now
Mhm.
we do have examples of Eastern Orthodox, or I guess Oriental. I'm not sure if it was Eastern or Oriental, but the Ethiopian Christians who were canonized by Pope Francis. I think that was last year, and there was a guy, Pope Francis, named the Doctor of the Church and a saint, I believe, a couple years prior to that. I think that was 4 years ago, who was a Armenian Orthodox, and those people were explicitly not Catholic when they died,
Hmm.
and they are explicitly canonized by the Pope. So that's the topic of the
And
different
so
types of.
those the formally canonized ones, those are the ones that I'm
Yeah.
thinking of that are infallibly declared.
So I have gone to the actual documents
Mhm.
on canonization, and nothing in those documents says we declare and define these people in heaven.
Mhm. It
So
doesn't have the
there's
formula.
nothing about what's that?
It doesn't have the formula.
It doesn't have the formula.
Hmm.
Now, there's also a question. Even if it did have the formula, is this within the realm of the jurisdiction of papal authority is another question. Even if he did try to do that, is it within his authority?
Mhm.
It's like the Pope can't declare, we declare and define the Earth is flat or the Earth is round. Even it's just not in his jurisdiction. Now the Earth is either flat or round. It doesn't matter which, though. He can't define it. He can say it all he wants that it's round or it's flat, but it doesn't matter if he's right or wrong. It's not in his purview to make that decision. Many would
Mhm.
argue that even if he tried, it's not in his purview, it's not in his jurisdiction. However, he has not tried. The
Right.
documents and nothing other, because I've looked into this, there's nothing, as far as I've been able to find, and maybe someone could prove me wrong, there is nothing in church magisterium that says canonizations are infallible.
Mhm.
And the arguments people tend to go on are the arguments from St. Thomas Aquinas, which, in my opinion, have actually been debunked by virtue of the liturgical reforms of Vatican II,
Hmm.
when they basically said, "Hey, like a lot of these people didn't even likely exist, and we had them on our liturgical calendar."
I was
Um,
going to mention
You
that there.
cannot
I think there
convince me
are
that St.
some like
Christopher
folk
didn't exist.
saints that are pretty questionable on whether or not they actually existed, and
yeah,
um,
Saint Christopher,
are,
Saint Veronica, they probably didn't exist.
You will
I
not
mean,
convince me that
they're
the dog-headed man doesn't exist. Come on.
my personal
um,
favorite is Saint Winifred, um, who probably was a real dog, but was a dog. um,
Which I will point out for another day might be problematic. Um, do go on though.
another
what's
thing
that?
I was going to mention too,
Go
would
on.
canonization be more akin to like Eucharistic miracles or relics or like things that that the church looks into and they declare it. This is like you can,
It's worthy of
you know,
belief.
worthy of belief, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's like some infallible statement that this is like that kind of thing or whatever.
So I think that we can
Yeah,
draw a
I
distinction,
think
right?
that's great.
I think we can draw the distinction here that it is. We can say it's dogmatically declared, or at least doctrinally, infallibly regardless, as part of the magisterium, as being worthy of belief, as being part of the church's liturgical practice. Because that is certainly, I think that part is certainly within the domain of the authority of the Pope, right?
Yeah, so the magisterium can definitely say that this is part of our liturgical practice, and
yeah.
I would actually compare it, and I think this. So, and let me take a step back actually for a second. The argument that Aquinas made, and perhaps as a Thomist, you can make this argument better than I can, but he basically said that that God would not allow someone to be on the liturgical calendar who is in hell or did not exist. So basically, like the very fact that someone is being prayed to in the mass asked for prayer in the mass every single year or even day for some of the saints, God wouldn't have allowed it to go on for days, months, years, decades, centuries if that saint didn't exist, or worse, if he was in hell. The problem is the church has declared a lot of these people haven't existed, probably didn't exist, and they're removed from the calendar. But still more, the same argument could be made for, if that's the case, the same argument could be made for uh, recognition of visions and apparitions. So, for example, Our Lady of Fatima probably happened. The Virgin Mary probably did appear to the three children in Fatima, and gave them the prophecies that she gave them. But it's not infallible, and no one ever thinks it's infallible, and yet it's on our liturgical calendar. So, by St. Thomas Aquinas' argument, shouldn't that be infallible as well? And yet it's not. We also have the example, the church has explicitly said we don't know what happens to unbaptized infants who die. So, the popular opinion is they go to heaven, but we don't know. And the church has explicitly said that. We don't know for sure, so we pray for them. And yet we have a feast day for the martyrs of the children who were killed by Herod. So, okay, are they infallibly saints now? Because the church has said we can't know. So the church, by that virtue alone, I think, is saying we don't know.
Let's come back to that one, because that's very closely related to another topic I wanted to talk about in the context of Charlie Kirk. So we'll come back to that example in particular, because I think that's a nice parallel that we can look at. But when we get to it.
Yeah. Now there are some cases I know. Like for example, Abraham is in heaven in Scripture. Like we see him in heaven. Yeah. Jesus talking about him in heaven. So like there are some saints that are definitely certain. But the church isn't declaring that, Jesus did. So that's why we know they're in heaven. But everyone else is a fallible certainty, and the church a fallible confidence, I should say. The church is saying we're confident, that's why we're putting it on the calendar. I don't doubt any particular saint that's on the calendar was a saint, if they're real, at least. Saint Christopher, Saint Veronica, probably not, but I don't doubt the ones that we know are real people. The church has declared they're saints. I have no reason to doubt that, but they might not be. We can't say for certain with absolute confidence.
What I was going to ask, would the church infallibly declare something that wasn't necessary for us to believe as Catholics?
Well, if it's been infallibly declared, it becomes necessary for us to believe as Catholics. So, for example, St. Thomas Aquinas did not necessarily need to believe in the Immaculate Conception when he denied it, but now that it's been infallibly declared, now if he were still alive and was aware of that fact, he would need to assent to that belief.
Well, I think necessary here would mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Len, you're talking more about like the theological implications or the soteriological implications of a belief, right?
I think so, yeah, because in that example of the Immaculate Conception, if you deny the Immaculate Conception, you'll wind up with theological errors. But if you,
it leads you to Christological heresies, presumably.
Yeah, but for most saints,
yeah,
if you deny say like if you deny like the particular canonization of a particular saint, it's not going to affect it in that
Well,
way.
it could.
With the exception of a few biblical saints, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it could, right? So I mean, Abraham's not the best example, but something like Saint Dismas, the thief on the cross. Right.
Well, he's a good example, yeah, for sure.
Denial of his canonization is, if you were to deny that, it would be, one, denial of Scripture, because Christ said so, and then two, denial of Christ's power of, let me rephrase, of God's absolute power to save souls, particularly outside the standard means that he left us. And that's actually a really important doctrine. And it's actually an important doctrine for the salvation of those who are, at least nominally, and at least in this life, outside the temporal bounds of the church too.
If I could actually put my my Jimmy Aiken hat on for a second,
It's a good hat.
I could play devil's advocate just a little bit against myself and what you just said, and say, well, Jeremiah 18, Ezekiel 18, I think Ezekiel 34, all talk about if God promises a blessing, and that based on someone who has been righteous, or a country has been right, a nation's been righteous, he promises to bless them, but then they repent of their righteousness, God will repent of the blessing he promised them. So theoretically, the promise to Saint Dismas could have been while he was, repentant in the state of grace, but then, just after that moment, he then decides to commit a mortal sin, and the blessing no longer applies. But I think we have reasonable.
Perhaps at the moment of Christ's death, he despairs of the salvation he was promised, and so something like that. I mean, there's a plausible story you could make, maybe.
Theoretically, one could say there's a chance that happened,
right?
But I think it's a near certain he is in heaven. And I think the same with Abraham. You could say, well, that was actually just a parable that we see him in heaven, and so it's not really like it's a pretty. I mean, Jesus is talking about it pretty certainly, but again, one could make the case, and so just even those are a little bit difficult to say we have 100% infallible certainty, because one could make a case that is possible, even though not plausible, if that's fair to say.
But I do think, Len, I take your point that canonizations seem to be, for the most part, less significant to the Catholic religious life, let's say. At least particular canonizations. Again, with exceptions, maybe, right? If you're going to deny the sainthood of the Blessed Virgin, no, sorry, you're out.
She is one that we actually. That's an example. Mary is one that is infallibly, and we do have infallible certainty, but that's more of an accident of the assumption being defined infallibly than a infallible declaration of just her sainthood. But I would actually just one more thought on that. If the church hasn't declared canonizations are infallible, that de facto makes it a fallible issue. And I would argue that the burden of proof is on someone saying the church has declared it infallible, and they haven't, as far as I've been able to find. Therefore, if someone wants to say canonizations are infallible, they have the burden of proof to find where the church teaches that. If it doesn't, then it's not. Because a fallible list of infallible saints is no better than the Protestants' fallible list of infallible books. It doesn't work. You can't have that. It doesn't make sense.
Well, okay. Nuanced middle ground here. I love that. I love that sort of thing. Not maybe I don't have a hat, but I can be Jimmy Aiken. I'll put on my Jimmy Aiken beard for a minute. And
there you go. There you go. You do have a very orange beard.
Yeah. It's not Jimmy Aiken yet, but it'll get there eventually. And once I have that much knowledge, then the beard will grow to match. In any case, I think that there is a reasonable middle ground between Protestant type of uncertainty and infallible dogma. There is the ordinary magisterium, and there is the obligation to believe with divine and Catholic faith, which we have for even ordinary doctrinal statements that are not infallibly declared or defined. For example, my least favorite example, because I find it particularly difficult to hold on to, mostly because I have some theoretical quibbles with it, would be something like monogenism. That there is no There is no man that does not have genealogical descent from Adam. Right? And I have issues with that are way aside from this conversation. But things like that has never been declared. It has never been defined, but it is doctrine.
No, and the church has in more recent years allowed for, was it polygenism, polygenism?
Well, not exactly. Right? It hasn't actually changed. What I want to get at, and the nuance here is that the church allows for.
I would have comments. If we would get into that, I have comments. But maybe I'm getting to the weeds by
even we can get into it, right? In terms of canonization, right? The church allows for dissent and disagreement, but only, I guess you'd say, only speculatively, right? It doesn't allow for declarations to the contrary. Right? I can't come out and say there are in fact true men who are not genealogically descended from Adam. But I can, it is licit for me to raise the question and to challenge the existing doctrine because it's not infallibly declared, right? And you could presumably do the same for even a canonized saint, right? If you had a really good reason to think that Saint Dismas did in fact despair of salvation after Christ's death or something like that, after Christ's death and before his own, if you had a really good reason to think that, say, I can't think of a good reason to think that, but if you could come up with a good reason to think that, I'm not so creative about these things.
Yeah.
But if you could, then you can make that argument. But it would be, I think it would be impermissible to say Dismas is in fact in hell, and here's why I think that. I think that's the
unless you had a good reason to do so.
Well, I think even if you did, you would have to say, here are reasons for thinking this. You can't make the conclusion. I think that's the line, I think.
No, with the evidence we have, Judas might be a better example of someone you could say you think is hell. Here is the reasons, because there are some verses about Judas that seem to imply he goes to hell, although there's good counter arguments too. And I think that there is a plausible case that he may have been saved, or at least a possible case, I'll say. I don't know if Judas.
Let's talk about that again later too. That's a good one.
I'm actually up in the air on Judas. As far as like, I don't think we can say one way or the other, because there's actually a good argument to make that there's a good argument to be made that he may have been saved at the end of it all. But that's it's speculation. We don't know, and that again goes back to the big question mark we have on the afterlife. Unless with rare exceptions, we don't know for most cases.
Mm-hmm.
We just off as an aside, because we should one of these days maybe talk about monasterism, because I would love to get into the weeds on that. I would actually disagree that magisterial at all what you said, but that's an aside. But back to
we'll get back to that another time. Let's do that some other time. But yes, I'm gonna write that down too. Okay, so you argued earlier on that the church could declare Charlie Kirk a saint, but it probably would not.
Very likely would not.
Okay, so I think you're probably right. I think I agree with you that the church could.
It would be completely
following the ordinary course of things, like prayers for intercession, attributed miracles, etc., that sort of thing. Which might come up later discussions when we talk about a little bit about the religious revivals and things like that. But why do you think it wouldn't happen? Because I have my reasons for thinking not, but why do you think?
Yeah. The idea of a non-Catholic saint is not unprecedented, as I talked about already. Mm-hmm. But the idea of a Protestant saint is completely unprecedented. And I think if that precedent were ever to happen, it would be with someone who is, at least in this current climate of recent popes, it would not be someone who's politically charged.
Okay.
It would be someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who, by all accounts, was a Christian martyr who died a good death, or perhaps someone like C.S. Lewis. But even C.S. Lewis, I don't think C.S. Lewis would, because C.S. Lewis had some questionable lifestyle choices. But someone like that, I could see potentially getting declared a saint.
And both of those are much closer denominations to Catholicism than Charlie Kirk was.
Yeah.
Contrary to popular opinion, Lutherans are actually very close to Catholic in their theology relative to most of Protestantism.
Anglicans as well, right?
Anglicans as well, yeah.
Especially in contrast to sort of evangelical pseudo-Baptist or whatever you want to call the American Christianity that Charlie Kirk was.
The Marian dogmas are on the same page as us. Baptism, regeneration, confession to a priest, like they're right on board with us for a lot of that. Lutherans will quibble a little bit on confession, but they still have it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you're probably right on both counts there. On first of all, the right, Len's point. Len, you made this point, right? That the sort of doctrinal distance between Catholicism and evangelicalism is much, much bigger than that between Catholicism and Anglicanism or even Lutheranism. And in terms of alad, and in terms of ecclesiastical politics, in terms of sort of ecumenism, the church reaching across the divide to, say, Lutherans, or to Anglicans for that matter, but Lutherans, I think especially, with Bonhoeffer. Is Lutheran, right? Am I getting that right?
He was Lutheran, yes.
Okay,
but he was very ecumenical with the Catholic Church.
Right.
And he was actually connected to Pope Pius XII via the June 20th plot. I mean, he was working closely with Stauffenberg and Joey Mueller, who were, Catholics. Mueller knew the Pope and was working with the Pope for those plots. So, I think he was only 2 degrees away from the Pope.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, I think that such a canonization would be, I think, correctly seen as an ecumenical outreach in a direction and at a distance, which I think that the Church and our Protestant brothers are kind of moving in the direction of, and I think it would be a sort of seen as a step towards unity. And so I think that is sort of in the church political milieu at the moment. Not so much reaching out to evangelicals.
Something like that I could definitely see happening.
Yeah.
Some Protestants do that in the opposite direction already. So for like Anglicans, I believe they have Saint Therese of Lisieux as one of their saints, and I think they even have Saint Thomas More, even though they killed him.
Yeah, they really do. I cannot fathom that. But...
The Lutherans beat us to the punch on Pope Saint Paul VI. They had him canonized before us. Yeah, they did.
Really?
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it definitely happens both ways.
Maybe they're onto something.
Yeah.
Not everything, but they're onto something, maybe. Yeah, and I think that the other point, the point that you made, Philip, was that Charlie Kirk's way too politically charged for.
Yeah.
Not even, I wouldn't even just say for the current church, which, yes, is, in American political terms, broadly speaking, on the left-ish side recently. Looking at Francis especially. But then also is at a sort of stage in church history of trying desperately to be above temporal politics. Right? Above the specifics of temporal politics. And to canonize the MAGA guy, despite his Christian message being forefront in a lot of ways, I still think that it's not likely for very understandable and honestly the political reasons that I can kind of get behind, right? Because that sort of thing would have, I would foresee some nasty negative ramifications for the church in terms of the salvation of souls, unfortunately.
And the church tries very hard. I mean, it's just like in the Civil War, the Second American Civil War, between the North and the South, as opposed to the First Civil War between Britain and the colonies. The Second American Civil War, the church didn't take a side. They flew the Confederate flag in the South and the Union flag in the North. And the same is true for most of those types of conflicts. The church will be very careful to not take sides and to this is a church for all men, and it's not about what flag you're flying. And so I think they don't want to drive people away by virtue of taking the side of one person or another. And unfortunately, they do sometimes take some sides, with the climate activism, the climate alarmism, and whatnot.
Yes, but on specific topics and issues, which I take less issue with than just taking a political side.
Yeah.
Sort of in
Yeah,
a
and
political
sometimes
position to do that.
they get they take flack for not taking sides. So just like you see with Pius the 12th, and often being called like Hitler's Pope because he didn't make like strong statements at the time, or
Which
other bishops and
the Jews of his day were asking him to stop making strong statements because he was enraging Hitler and causing more trouble for the Jews by his statements. So, by request of the Jews of the day, prominent rabbis of the day, he stopped making statements and began operating underground to assassinate Hitler and to get Jews out covertly. And he was much more effective that way than speaking against Hitler openly. And he gets criticized for doing that, but he was very effective because he stopped talking about it and started, Percy's position was clear at that point, and we're not going to talk about it anymore, but we're going to actively try to assassinate Hitler and
he didn't
get
need to
Jews
say
out of
more
there.
at that point, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of obvious.
Clear at that point.
Yeah. No, I mean, by contrast.
Also, I was gonna I was gonna just correct you, Philip, that that wasn't the second Civil War. That was the Second Revolutionary War, according to Brian McClanahan. But never mind, that's
right, the one that we lost, right? Yeah, that one. A Floridian, I'm a bit of a partisan.
I'm not going to take a side on that one because as much as I don't like the Union, I also the Confederacy had some pretty big problems too.
Oh, sure,
but
it was a state. It's in the name. Of course, it had problems.
Fair enough. Well, I will say the one nice thing about the South was that it was not a state; it was states.
True. Yes,
So,
I'll grant you that. Well, the North was too until Lincoln did his thing.
That's why they call it the second. Yeah, that's why they call it the Second Revolution, because it changed us from from these United States to this United States.
Right. Because America isn't supposed to be one country of 50 states. It's supposed to be 50 countries with one,
alliance,
overarching. The federal government was never meant to be a government over the states. The states are above the Fed, constitutionally speaking. Before the
on the note of taking sides in these silly little political conflicts and wars and whatnot, everybody is, I guess, understandably saying that, well, the Palestinian, like in the context of Israel and Palestine, right, the Palestinians deserve a state. And I'm just thinking, what did they ever do to deserve that? Would you wish that on someone?
I'm a big believer in the no state solution over there. We can do a whole episode on Israel, and I would love to do it because I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I think that most people get it wrong. Not just because they're not anarchists, but just in general, I think applying a lot of the biblical stuff to a lot of biblical prophecies to modern Israel is just incredibly misguided. But that's another topic. Israel's not all bad, and Palestine's not all good. There's definitely good and bad for both of them, but both sides get it very wrong on a lot of most of it.
Well, that's the Christian Zionism bit that gets wrong. Which, I mean, going back to the topic, right? Charlie Kirk was still, even though I mean, we can talk a little bit about, I suppose, about his his apparent shift on the political topic of Israel. I don't think he was particularly shifting on the theological topic. Not really.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing that because I don't know much about his views. I had heard he was shifting politically away from Israel and towards condemning some of their actions, because Israel's been murdering Christians for the last few years now, as well as giving Palestinians and say, oh, you have time to escape and go for this quarter, and this is where you can escape, so we won't bomb you. And then they bomb the quarter as people are escaping. So there's definitely been a lot of that has been coming out, and I understood he started to call some of that out from what I've heard.
And I mean, the more that people realize that the state of Israel has never been particularly tolerant of Christians, like since the foundation of the modern state of Israel, it has been illegal to evangelize.
Right.
So
there's no free speech in Israel.
Yeah.
Which, not that we believe in free speech as libertarians, but they should,
shorthand.
That doesn't mean the government should be suppressing speech either. That's a non sequitur.
Right. The government shouldn't throw you in a cage for spreading the message of Christ. Let's say that. I think we can be fair on that one. Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say too, because you don't think he was shifting on his theological?
I have not seen strong evidence. But this is actually one of the topics we wanted to talk about, so we can go into this. Right?
And
that
yeah, I guess
I have not seen strong
some
evidence.
insight to that because I'm in his. I'm located in Phoenix, which is where he was at, and so people have seen him go into Saint Bernadette Catholic Church in Scottsdale. So he's been attending mass. I believe the Archbishop of Los Angeles also had a statement about him inquiring about Catholicism with him too. You can also see some of it in some of his videos. So he had a greater appreciation for Mary towards the end of his life. Not like it's not like a full blown, but he was.
He wasn't in RCIA or whatever, or OCIA.
There are some reports that he was, but I don't know if those are true or not. But
I haven't actually heard any of that. But so
I think it'd be very easy to verify if it was true, and by now we would have that information.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm closely watching things. I don't know what we're going to find out. So I'm just, it's still up in the air, but I do actually think he was shifting though.
I think so too. I don't deny he was shifting, but I'm more with Vincent here, where I think there's a lot of wishful thinking about how much he was shifting and if he would have shifted all the way. I mean, we already discussed that Lutherans believe in all the Marian dogmas, so do Anglicans, and confession to a priest, and so like him shifting in that direction definitely does not mean he was about to become Catholic. I mean, I have a number of friends who have been shifting for years, and they're really just kind of still in firmly Protestantism, but just coming around to some of the various dogmas or teachings of the faith in a Protestant context. In fact, I have a number of friends now who believe in the real presence in the Eucharist, but they're fully Protestant, and they will not accept the ideas of a priest having to do it in apostolic succession.
It is difficult to know, like, if he would, but I am pretty hopeful that, he's already dead, but I think had he lived, I actually would have been hopeful that the possibilities are pretty good, because I mean, for one, he does have a Catholic wife, and he was scheduled to go on quite a few Catholic podcasts, including Bishop Barron.
That was like the next week after he died or something like that, if I remember right.
And I think Capturing Christianity, and I'm not 100% sure.
He was in talks with as well, yes.
And he's been talking with Michael Knowles a lot, and you know how that goes.
That too.
Yeah.
So I think he would have shifted that way. If I had to guess, like, I think he would have actually gone all the way if he was going to, like, he would either stay in evangelicalism or he would, go all the way.
And to your point, he was a reasonable person who was willing and able to challenge his own beliefs. And
that too. I was going to mention that too.
And he was actively dialoguing with Protestants, or with Catholics, and a reasonable person who's willing to challenge their own beliefs and is actively dialoguing with Catholics is pretty much just a few steps away from being Catholic.
He was very open to the truth.
And you're examining the faith, you're going to become Catholic. I'm sorry to say that for anyone who hasn't become Catholic yet and is left of the faith, but you're on your way if you're actually examining it fairly and reasonable, because the Protestantism is
we mentioned Cameron Bertuzzi. He's a great example.
Maybe they'll become Orthodox. Maybe they'll become Orthodox instead, but maybe he would be Orthodox. But like, he wouldn't have been Protestant very long if that was if he was really doing that.
He doesn't strike me as the
Orthodoxy is just a stepping stone to Catholicism, honestly.
It can be either.
I think there's a difference between Orthodoxy and American convertodox terminally online people, right? Those types are Protestants who want to be Catholic but hate the church. That's the people who just convert to Orthodoxy and stay there. Yeah. Okay. Jay Tyre. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a little uncharitable, but all right. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure a lot of Orthodox priests have basically condemned him and distanced himself. I think maybe some bishops have put the cross up against him. Like he's not. He is persona non grata in a lot of Orthodox circles with the hierarchy there, whatever hierarchy.
I really wish we did an episode on that Tim Cass debate with him, Tim Gordon, and the other guy.
I couldn't watch it.
I tried. I watched like 45 minutes of it, and it was just like, maybe not even. I
Interesting.
watched like a half hour probably, but it's just I couldn't get through it. It was too bad.
It's there's some it is bad. I don't disagree with you there, but it was really there is some interesting stuff that goes on in that thing, and there's a lot that you could like
Tim Pool was
respond
just
to
like,
as
"What
well.
are you guys talking about?" The entire time. What are you guys talking about? Like you could see his face. He had no idea what was going on. Like the stuff they were getting into.
Oh no, yeah, no,
There's a
okay, yeah,
part
Tim Pool.
there's a part at the end where Tim Pool like starts to or like Vatican II convinces Tim Pool of Catholicism at the end. So it
Okay,
was, I was like,
okay,
wow,
okay.
this is great.
Way off topic, and I promise we'll get back to the topic. But speaking of Tim Pool and being Catholic curious, I saw a video of his, which was just one of his little standalone videos, not part of a segment or anything, where he was talking about uh, the rise in exorcisms,
Oh yeah, I
saw that
watched
one
that.
too.
Yeah.
where
Yeah, it's a
he
good
just
one.
goes to a Father Ripperter video and just like clicks a random
Yeah.
video on Father Ripperter's channel on the suggestion of a comment in a comment section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, I really got it.
Father
He's like,
Ripperter-
I really got to keep watching this guy. And I'm like, all right, go for
Yeah, he
it.
wants to invite
See what
Ripper
happens.
onto his show. I find it
That'd be
really
fun.
unfortunate that's where he's going because Ripperger, in my opinion, is not credible. And maybe I don't know if you guys disagree with me or not, but I do not find Ripperger to be a credible source. I don't doubt he's a good and holy man. I'm not going
Yeah.
to challenge him as a priest or as a but he will teach things as a matter of fact that are not church teaching.
Yeah.
He will state things about demonology that are only mere opinions, that are one of many opinions that the church has
Yeah.
not taught. And he will actively teach about falsehoods as if they're true. For example, he tells a story about how Harry Potter's demonic, and
Oh yeah.
he has the proof that it's demonic because he there's this one girl in I forget what town, Boston or something, who tried to cast a flame
Oh no, this
spell
was
from
that
Harry
was in
Potter.
Spain. I remember this
And
story
and
specifically because this is
yeah,
actually
you're right.
what kind of made me
And she
realize that
burned
Ripperger
her
might
house
not be
down by
all
trying
about.
to cast it. And he talked about the story and all the details of it, and he gave enough details that you could Google it. So I did. And sure enough, no, she wasn't trying to cast a flame spell. She was having a Harry Potter themed party, and she was cooking some treats, some pastries and things for that party, and they were themed after Harry Potter characters and things. One of them was like a phoenix cookie or something like that. And yeah, she left the oven on when she left the house, and that's how the house burned down. It had nothing to do with her trying to cast magic, but he's talking about this as if it's proof that Harry Potter is demonic because someone
Yeah.
burned their house down with a Harry Potter spell. That's just not what happened.
Right.
He also I am a charismatic. I would consider myself a continuationist with the spiritual gifts of 1 Corinthians 11. And he talks about how a lot of ways people get possessed is by asking for the gifts of the Spirit. And he says, if you ask for the gift of tongues or any of the gifts of the Spirit, you'll get possessed by demons, or you're likely to get possessed by demons, he said. Well, okay, so apparently he believes in a God who, if you ask for an egg, God will give you a rock, or if you ask for a fish, God will give you a scorpion, because that's not the God that Jesus teaches. Now maybe he's right that the gifts aren't like what because there's some debate on that in the Catholic Church about what how the gifts presence in the church today and how they work exactly. But even if he's right about the gifts of tongues, or the gifts in general being not as what the charismatics would present them as, asking for the gifts of the Spirit is not going to get you possessed. That's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So I would consider him a false teacher on some areas, even like where he's
I think he
actively
is
teaching against
okay.
Scripture.
I think that Tim Pool or somebody like Tim Pool in his position, going to Father Ripperger for an introduction to demonology is a really dangerous road. If you know what you're getting into, he can be really interesting, and he does have some really good insights mixed in with some nonsense.
Insights for sure.
So
I wouldn't throw out everything he has to say for sure. And I should say, I want to clarify what I just said.
Kind of thing.
I wouldn't say he's a false teacher, but he has some false teachings. Let's put it that way. He's a false teacher that implies a heretic. He's not a heretic, but he's definitely teaching some things that are contrary to the clear established faith. Probably unknowingly, unwittingly, but he needs to check himself, I think, on some of those areas. Jimmy Akin has done some harsh critiques of him as well that are worth
I gotta
watching.
look into more of those. Okay, so bring back to the topic, right? I want to talk about a little bit on on the topic of Charlie Kirk and his apparent move towards Catholicism, especially
Yeah.
kind of in connection to this point of Israel and Zionism. I haven't seen much evidence that he was moving away from support for Israel for religious reasons. The only thing I've seen is that he has been questioning the U.S. relationship to Israel for political reasons.
Yeah,
That,
that's what I've.
that it's losing copious support and that this is a non-starter for the political right. Because no one under 30 supports Israel, and those are the people he talks to. But then also, there is this, in addition to it being where is it going with this? Oh, right. In addition to it being, politically difficult, there's also the obvious problem of he has been hearing these arguments from people he's been talking to, and he doesn't have good answers for it. Whereas it's Charlie Kirk. If you've seen him, he has good answers for a lot of stuff. He doesn't seem to have great answers for hey, Israel seems to be committing a genocide. What gives? And all he kind of has is, well, they're not committing a genocide. Maybe they're doing some wrong things, but they're doing their best, right? Which he knows is not a great answer. And he's getting frustrated with that, like he has been. That much I think we can say. But I don't think it's religious. I don't think he is really deeply questioning the kind of evangelical Zionism.
From what I've seen too, he even after he's done a lot of criticisms towards like the Israeli government and Netanyahu, he will still then toe the line of like the sort of the religious Zionism support for he still he still touts his support for Israel even as he's criticizing the Israeli government.
Well, I mean, if anything, it's like he's critical of Netanyahu's government in support of Israel. Right? Because if you really do support Israel and you want Israel to prosper and to thrive, you do not want the Likud party in control. Absolutely not. That's like that's like being America first and saying I don't want Joe Biden, the walking corpse man, as my president. Right? That's very clear. I think that's kind of more the direction he was going in terms of support for Israel. If he was, I think, going to wind up questioning the dispensationalist Zionism, it was going to be as a result of moving more towards Catholicism, not a reason for moving more towards Catholicism.
Absolutely,
so maybe down the line, maybe, but I don't think he was there.
Did we lose Philip?
There he is. Good time.
Here I am.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I'm back.
I didn't plan that.
Did you hear everything Vincent was saying, or?
I got the gist of it.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
But yeah. I would agree basically wholeheartedly with that assessment there on I don't think he was going to go away religiously from Israel unless he actually did go towards Catholicism, and that took him out of which wouldn't necessarily do, because there's a lot of Catholics in government that are unfortunately Zionist too. But
but are there any under the age of 70?
He could still. A lot of Catholics hold very similar positions to dispensationalists on Israel. Unfortunately, that's a thing, and I don't think the church has firm teaching to condemn that. So it is allowed to some degree. I mean, dispensationalism's not, but a view on Israel very similar. I mean, even Jimmy Akin seems to believe that Israel as a state is some sign of the end times. So now he's not as firm on like this is a fulfillment of X, Y, and Z prophecy, but he definitely has said more than once that it's an indication or a sign that it could be the end or getting towards the end. I should say he's very open ended with it end, like it could be a the end in a broad sense. Maybe a long time left, but still.
Right. Okay. So the other topic I wanted to get on, which we kind of breezed over, is whether Charlie Kirk should be considered a martyr. I'm open to being convinced once again, as with the sainthood thing. So what do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, maybe Len, you can go first if you want to. I have thoughts, but I don't want to
Yeah, what do you
steal the
got?
show.
Oh, the only thing I was going to really say was, on that was if the rumors were true that he like there's some rumors, and like I said, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but there were some rumors that he had actually joined OCIA, and if that
Hmm.
was the case, then he would be treated just like any catechumen who would have died during the process of OCIA.
That is true, actually. I mean, that's just a baptism of desire, essentially, right?
Yeah,
Yes. Well, and that's assuming he joined OCIA with the intention of joining the Catholic faith. Some people go through OCIA
True.
just to learn.
True.
So that is a thought. But I would also say, I would also differentiate the question of is he in heaven from is he a martyr?
Right.
Because
oh, okay,
you
I see what you
let's say he was at OCIA when he was murdered. That still doesn't mean he was a martyr.
Not
mean. Yeah,
So,
necessarily.
he has to die for the faith.
um, and I would say that I think whether or not he's a martyr I would categorize first of all I would parse it out a little bit because you can be a martyr for more than one thing. I would say politically he was a martyr for his beliefs for sure.
Oh yeah.
There's no question of that because he was killed because he was teaching the politics and social issues he was. So politically, yes, he is a political martyr. But I think the more important question to the faith is was he a Christian martyr?
Hmm.
And that is where I would go to the fact that he said that all of his beliefs are all of the things he is doing were because of his Christian beliefs. And the thing he particularly was killed for was an area directly related to the faith. He was teaching the truth on transgender stuff and LGBT stuff. And that is what got him killed, which is an issue that is directly from his faith. Now it's a
Hmm.
issue you can come to by reason as well, which is what he would argue from. But he was doing it, and he explicitly said he was doing it because of his faith. So I would say it's a he believed that he did well. It's like so he believed this way because of his faith. So he did this because of his faith. So he died because of his faith. So it's even if it
Yeah.
was 2 degrees away, it was all connected to his faith. So I don't think that's. I think it follows that he is a Christian martyr.
Yeah. And I would add even because I think I agree. I think I agree. I'm not as I'm not as dead set on this, but I think I agree. But I would actually even add to this that I think that in addition to well, his faith is why he was saying the things that he was saying. I think that his faith was also his reason for saying anything at all. Right? It was his impetus for
Right.
standing up and speaking and
Yeah.
spreading the truth as he understood it. Right? That is like the reason he had for speaking the truth at all was his love of Christ. Right? Christ
And you
as
watch
the
his
truth.
video. You watch his videos, and he would go right from talking about gun rights to hey, you should be a Christian. Let's talk about that. And like it
Yeah.
would like just the most. It would almost seem like just a non sequitur jump, but somehow he would bring it back to the faith and then try to convert someone.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of videos of him talking about transgenderism, and then people kind of changing their mind on it, and then he's given the gospel to him, or at least the gospel as best as he knows it, I should
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
He was
So,
so spectacularly good at that. And that was actually
oh
something that
yeah,
I hadn't noticed as much before as I wish I had.
right.
Because that's something that we should, I think, emulate or should seek to. Because I mean, because he always brought it back, like thinking about the transgender issue. Right? He would always bring it back to the dignity of the person, that you are who you really are, who God made you, and right there, boom, there's his transition,
Yeah,
right into, right from you have these delusional beliefs, they are not you. What you are is a beloved child of God. That's a
yeah.
really quick little
And,
process.
and the transgender issue is really a religious issue
Yeah.
because to believe the transgender philosophy is a Gnostic heresy. It is
Yeah.
Docetism. It is the belief that the soul and the body are distinct things, that we're just in a flesh suit, and our soul is a distinct thing from our body, and that your flesh suit might not match the soul. So you may have a female soul in a male body, or a male soul in a female body, and that is a Gnostic belief. It's Docetism. It's just rebranded Docetism applied to the sexual sexual aspect of humanity.
Yeah.
Now they're not saying the flesh is inherently evil like Docetists would, but they're heavily borrowing from Docetist philosophy.
Well, they sort of are, right? They sort
Yes,
of are saying that, right? Or at least that
oh, well, in their case, yeah.
because the body is intrinsically not even like, no, my body is evil because it doesn't match my soul or my self perception. Just the body in general, I think they would have to say is evil in the sense of being. How do I put this? You'll hear things like,
They see the soul as the good, and the body is not in accordance with that, and so
yeah,
therefore it's a privation of the good that their soul is.
yeah, well, like when there is a mismatch between the two, when they perceive a a discrepancy between soul and body, they will always defer to the soul rather than the body, even if it's something that is strictly corporeal, like our sexuality or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And
That's
then
not the same as
further,
saying the
yeah,
body's inherently evil, though. So I don't think
well, I
it's
think they would.
quite the same as Darwinism.
I as much as I hate to say it like this, I feel like it does. Right? I feel
Okay.
like there is something almost Manichaean here, that the body is not just mismatched with the soul, but is a kind of trap for the soul. And that our utmost freedom is to do with it what we will, rather than to be constrained by it, or rather than to be even guided by it. It's the it's in that way, I think, related to the existentialist impulse to see reality, constraints of reality itself, as a limit on my freedom. You'll hear people like Jean-Paul Sartre said this, probably most coherently and most forcefully, that um, that if God exists, then I'm not free. It's that dichotomy that God, qua creation, that the consistency of the world, the way the world is an imposition upon my freedom. And so the corporeal reality in which I find myself is is an affront to me. And so it's evil. And so I think that you can spin out the sort of ideology of transgenderism really quickly into a full blown classical Gnosticism. Um, but with the weird little caveat that it's strictly materialist. That's the weirdest part to me.
I
Like,
don't think they're really materialists, though. I
they
really
say
don't.
they are.
I think that the transgenders, are necessarily.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the LGBT crowd now is the same crowd now saying you can have two spirit as a sexual identity.
Well,
So okay, are we materialists? Are we spiritual? Do we have spirits?
yeah. Well, who said they
Because
were
yeah,
intellectually consistent? No one has ever accused them of that.
no, but I don't think the LGBT, I don't think the T, at least in LGBT,
Mm-hmm.
is materialist. I really don't think it is.
Well, I hear
Um,
it.
there
Okay,
are,
I think
I
there
think
is a
there are
materials
some,
version of it, right? Where
yes, I
it's
think there are
not
some,
mind body dualism, it's brain body dualism, which is the
yeah,
weirdest kind of
I was
Gnosticism I've ever
going to say
heard.
that. I have encountered a few who have said that that there is it's their brain that's
Yeah,
not lining with their body. I have encountered a few, but it's usually they talk about it in very spiritual terms usually,
yeah,
and it
or at
sounds like
least
Dostoevsky.
psychological terms, which is CK, soul, right?
Yeah,
Self perception, uh, will, even, right? Which again are immaterial, non physical terms or concepts, I should say.
Another aspect of how it's theological is that like it's essentially like an attack on the Trinity in a way. Um,
Say more.
yeah. Please do.
Great. Now I've just lost my train of
Oh no, I'm
thought.
sorry.
I, I had it at the beginning of the thing, and then now it's gone. So actually, go ahead and continue. It'll come back to me.
Okay. I mean,
Well, if I could bounce off of what Lam may have been getting at, or maybe just an additional point that was inspired by that, is in general, and this is something that is under talked about, is that the entire nature of sex is a typological symbol of God and the church.
True. Yeah.
And this is why sexual sin is so grievous, because the sexual sin, the sexual act, I say not sin, but the sexual act, the marital act, is a symbol of Christ and His church. That we receive Christ in the Eucharist. He gives us His whole body, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, and we give ourselves to Him as He gives Himself to us in whole. In a whole giving of oneself to the other. He is in us, we are now in Him. And Paul himself in Ephesians 5 talks about this mystical union as being symbolized by the husband and the wife and their relation, their connection. So sexual disorders, sexual acts of disorder or abuse of the sexual parts this is why it's so grievous, because it is in some ways a blasphemous act. This is why contraception is why what do you call it, onanism, or the act prior to marriage, or the act outside of the context, by oneself. Those acts are grave sins because they are blasphemous. Because they abuse the symbol that is meant to be ordered towards a symbol of Christ and His church, if that makes sense. So I think that yes, there definitely is some level of blasphemy in it as well.
And I mean,
but
there's a reason. Briefly, there's a reason that what we might call pelvic issues, issues of sexual morality, and not wanting to obey such commands. There's a reason that is so very often the reason people have for leaving the church or leaving religion entirely.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Len, do you
it makes you stupid, and there's something about the sexual stuff. People have a very hard time accepting church's sexual teachings, despite the fact that they're very reasonable.
Yeah. Len, did you remember what you were getting at with us?
So I think maybe the point that I was doing was a little bit more broader, not maybe not so specifically on transgenderism, but like the whole alphabet movement in general is because kind of like what Philip was saying, like the family is kind of a symbol of the Trinity. And so like the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Father pours out His love to the Son, and the Son I think the way it's worded is the Son receives that love, and then the love between them is so profound that it's the third person, the Holy Spirit, and so like you have the Father and the Mother, and their love is so profound that it becomes a third person, a child, and the alphabet movement just sort of completely tries to take that and that what is a symbol of the Trinity, and tries to distort it. So
yeah.
And I think that back to something we were talking about a bit earlier, right? That the kind of thing that we're doing right now, this highly theologizing of what most people would think of as a personal issue or a political issue or whatever, I think that is something else that I think Charlie was great at. That he not just could, but he refused not to steer any given conversation about these topics straight into the faith, straight into Jesus. And yeah, I think that's a large part of why they killed him instead of why somebody killed him instead of somebody killing Matt Walsh, who sure is Catholic, but does not steer most of his conversations to the church.
Yeah,
right.
Although Mike Knowles does for a lot of his stuff.
That's true.
But
that's true. He should be a little careful.
Walsh is more of its own topic when he talks about it.
Yeah.
I'm interested in talking, Leonard, you wanted to talk about, or who was it the one to talk about, was it worth it?
I think I brought that up initially. Speaking of Matt Walsh.
Yeah, I think
yeah, well,
I mean, I have my own thoughts on that, and I'm not firm.
What brought this up to my mind is Matt Walsh did a segment, I don't know, a week or two ago, pretty shortly after Charlie was assassinated. And he asked the question.
I don't watch Wolf regularly. You have to fill me in.
Okay, I'll go through it briefly. Maybe I'll even put a clip in here and in post. We'll see. Maybe not.
A couple of days ago, someone asked me a question that I've been thinking about ever since. And the question was this: do I think that Charlie thought that it was worth it in the end? In his dying moments, if he was able to think anything at all, if he was able to form any thoughts before he passed, did he think that it was worth it? Was it worth fighting for truth given the price he had to pay for it? If all he had worked for had led him to this moment, death, pain, was it worth it? Would he take it all back if he had known the cost, if he had known that it would cost him literally everything? And this is a question that resonates deeply because it has personal implications for all of us. You know, when I say that we're under attack, that they want us dead, that all of this is probably going to get worse before it gets better, I really mean it. I don't say it for effect or to be dramatic or to generate a viral clip or whatever. I say it because I believe it to be true, which means that I have to ask myself. We all have to ask ourselves, is it worth it? What if you meet the same fate as Charlie? I mean, really think about it. What if you do? If you have the chance to think anything before the lights go out, will you think that it was worth it? Or will you wish that you had just kept your mouth shut, that you had stayed out of it, that you hadn't put yourself out there? What did Charlie think about that? Well, I don't know what Charlie thought, obviously. I mean, there are a lot of people speaking for Charlie, putting words in his mouth, telling us what he thought or would have thought about this or that. I don't want to do that. Because the truth is, I don't know what goes through a man's mind when he's in his final moments. I literally cannot imagine it. When he's lying in a pool of his own blood and all he can hear is the chaos and the screaming and the shrieks of horror all around him. When he's confronted suddenly and violently with the reality that he will never see his wife and children again in this life. I don't know what kind of thoughts you think, if any. But if I had to guess, based on what I know about Charlie, did he think it was worth it? Yes. Yes, I really do. And what I can say for sure, without making any assumptions about Charlie's state of mind, is that it was worth it. Charlie died because he stood for the truth. Let's make no mistake about that. That's why he was killed. He was killed because he spoke the truth. And the truth is worth any cost that we must pay for it. The truth is worth our lives. It's worth our blood. It's worth even the grief and tears of our loved ones. Because the truth is the only thing that's worth anything. And the truth always wins in the end. The truth always prevails. I mean, you can hide from it. You can lie about it. You can try to distract from it. You can attempt to confuse and change the subject. You can cajole and harass and threaten those who speak it. You can kill them, but you can't kill the truth. The truth will outlive all of us. It was here before us. It'll be here after us. When we're all dead and gone and our graves are forgotten and overgrown, the truth will still be the truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ is the truth. The truth is Christ. The truth is eternal. There's nothing more important than it. It's more important than any of our lives. And the truth is what Charlie dedicated his life to. So yes, the truth is worth dying for because it's worth living for. And Charlie never forgot that. And neither should we.
If you guys see it, it'll be there. In any case, but he asked what I thought was a really impactful question. It's really something that we should think about, which is that was it worth it? Was what Charlie did worth it, given the end that he received? Right? If he either just objectively or for him, right, would he have thought so? In other words, would Charlie have thought that if he had known what was coming, if he had known that he would be murdered for saying the things that he said, for speaking the truth, for being effective in politics, for spreading the gospel, for all of this, would he have backed off? Or would he have done anything differently? Or would he have said, yes, I did what I was called to do, and I did well?
I think he would have, honestly.
I think so too.
Like, I think I think he would have saw it as his sort of participation in Christ's self-sacrifice.
Yeah, I
It
think
would
you're
be
right.
like his kind of his version of the cross.
Now, careful there. Careful there, because also, what really, I don't remember if Walsh really got into this part, but also, would it have been worth it to him to leave his family behind?
Right, and this is
Knowing
what
that
I was
was
going
what
to
was
get into.
coming. That's difficult.
Definitely what I was thinking about. So there's a couple of things to think about here. One, and this actually goes back to the question of, is he a martyr?
Yeah.
If it was just politics, if this was all about the politics and this was not being done because of his faith, if that's true, like some people have said, he's not a martyr. He was just a political figure who died. He happened to be a Christian.
Or he was a
If
martyr
that's
for a
true,
political cause, like you said earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Merely for a political cause.
Merely a political martyr. If that is the case, then I would say it's quite likely he would not have done it. If he wasn't inspired by his faith to do it, if it was just a matter of this my political views, quite frankly, I know, like, I'm serious about my faith, and I know, I'm going to talk about my political views, and they connect to my faith. But, like, I'm willing to shout about my political views when it comes to matters of the faith or protecting my family or whatever, But at least insofar as it's how do I phrase that? But, like, yeah, if it's something I feel I need to speak as a Christian, I will. But, like, I understand, like, I think as a Christian, like a reasonable Christian, if it's not something they have to say and you're saying it's going to cause you death, you don't say it. You know, so, we have an obligation to our family first before the greater society. So, yes, maybe as men, we have a duty to speak up and vote and to speak out on political issues and whatnot. But our family is our first responsibility. And if doing so is going to take away our family, then I think that we actually have a duty to step back and take care of the family. The family comes first. But sometimes the two do mingle. You can't choose; it's both or none. But I would say that I think that I'm sorry, we're after midnight here, folks. For anyone that's watching me starting to stutter, I'm very tired. But I think that that this is more. I think he was doing it for more than just political. I think, like I said, he was a martyr, and I think he was doing this for his faith. And I think knowing that he's going to die for his faith, he's being a good witness, not just for his family and a testament to his children about how a Christian should live, but also the good he did for society. Because I think ultimately, even for the faith, in many ways, his first responsibility was to his family. So, like, if me evangelizing a stranger means I can't evangelize one of my children, then the child comes first. Because our duty is to our family. So maybe you feel called to be this great, Billy Graham style televangelist, but that means you can't be a good father. Well, guess what? If you're a father, you're called to be a father first. And so whatever dreams you had of being a televangelist, if that means you can't be a good father, you can't be a televangelist, at least if you're following God. So I think there is some nuance to be had here. Was he actually called to do this? Well, he felt he was, and as long as he felt he was, then yes, I think he would have done that, because he was seen to be following God as best he felt he could or should. But I think in hindsight, knowing he would die for it, and knowing his family comes first, I question whether or not he would have. Does that make a sense? I'm not sure on this issue,
So I
honestly.
think the way I see it, there's at least 3 questions at play here. 1, was it worth it? Right? Objectively speaking, was it the right thing to do to say the truth, to preach the gospel, even knowing that it'll get him killed? Was it objectively correct, ethically speaking? Was it a good and moral and heroic thing to do? Question 2, would he have done it? Would he have chosen to, knowing the end?
Yeah.
And then question 3, would you?
Yeah, right.
And that's something else too, because I think, well, first of all, how we think of 2 and 3 really relies on the answer to 1. And I tend
And
to think
I think
that.
3 is a
Go ahead.
3 is a difficult question
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the answer to 1 and 2 could very well mean I should do it.
Yeah.
But whether I would or not, I'd like to think I would do the right thing, but we really don't know until you're in that moment.
Well, what do we think? Do we agree that 1, the answer is yes? That it was a good and heroic and just thing to do?
I think it was a good, heroic, and just thing to do, but I don't think that necessarily means it was the good and just and heroic thing for him to be doing.
Okay.
But I would say that I don't, and assuming he knew he was going to die for it, we're talking about. So assuming he was going to die for it, I do think he was, and actually that does change whether it's heroic and just, honestly, because at that point he is saying, "I'm sorry, my daughters, or daughter and son, I will no longer be your father because I'm going to go be a martyr for this." And the question is, knowing that, was it his time and place to die? Like, he's choosing it. It makes it a very different scenario in that case.
Yeah.
Now, maybe he doesn't know when he's going to die, but he knows it will get him killed at some point if he continues doing this. And he knows for a fact that before his daughters reach, let's say age 10, he'll die
While
for
they're
it.
still children, just broadly speaking. Before he has
Yeah,
had
while they're
enough
still
time with
children.
them. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. And post-pubescence is the most important time for children to have a father. They can do well without a father before that, but once they get towards those because women impart life, men impart identity, and pubescence is when identity is necessary. They need the identity imparted to them at pubescence. That's men are important before that, but they become most important after during that period. So he's missing out on the most important years of his children's life, and I think that's a hard question to say. What was his duty too? And I think if God really was calling him to do that, regardless of whether or not then yes, it was the right thing, because God's going to take care of his kids too. God can do that and will do that. Presumably, God will give the grace to be saved that they need.
And that is absolutely something that we should continue to pray for as well.
Yes.
In
for
all
sure.
cases like this.
Add the Kirk family to your prayers, especially their children, but Kirk as well too. Don't forget to pray for him, because he might be in purgatory.
We don't know.
So,
I think it's
going back to the original
something I've been thinking about with this is so like if you phrase the question as God is calling you to this particular specific fate, he would say yes. But if it was just somebody, like if I had built a time machine, went back in time and say, hey, if you do this thing at this point in time, somebody's gonna shoot you and you're gonna die. I think he would I think it would be reasonable for him to postpone that or wear a bulletproof
No, I think he
vest
absolutely, it would have been perfectly reasonable for him to cancel that stop on the tour. For sure. But I just mean generally, like, that someone is going to kill you for what you're doing. Right?
Yeah,
I think you have to keep it general like that to avoid that specific problem, because that's a big problem.
And here's a subjective problem here, because we don't know subjectively what he was called to be doing.
True.
If he was actually called to be doing this, which we don't know, only he knows, that's between him and God. If he was actually being called to do that, then he was absolutely right to continue. If he was, but again, I think his first primary calling was to his family. That doesn't mean he was. I'm not saying, to be clear, that he did anything wrong by being there that day. I'm not saying he failed his family or anything like that, or blaming him for it. We're hypothetically, if he had known he would die, that's where the question is here. Just to be clear,
purely reflectively here.
And I really think the first calling is to the family. A man's first objective calling is to his family.
Here's a parallel.
If I know going out and doing street evangelism every day is going to mean I can't evangelize my children, then I am failing my calling to my children by going out and doing street evangelism every day. And this is really what it comes down to. Here's a good example too. When I go to work every day, I am being paid to do a job. If I instead spend all of my time studying apologetics, Christian theology, and evangelizing everyone that comes in instead of selling them the products I'm supposed to sell them or doing the service I'm supposed to do for them, I am stealing from my employer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is an objectively good thing to be studying studying theology and apologetics and evangelizing people, but in the context of my workplace, I am called to do the job I'm supposed to be doing, which is selling product or doing services and
I'm sorry,
studying the
because
things that
I'm
I'm supposed to be
chuckling.
studying.
I'm chuckling not because I disagree or anything, but because you're unknowingly drawing this example directly from Duns Scotus.
Well, I
Who
was channeling a little bit of, I know, the wonder versus curiosity,
yeah. Well, no. Even okay. Scotus makes this argument that it can, in fact, be wrong under certain circumstances to worship God. Because if you're worshiping God when you should be sleeping, you will not be able to worship him properly tomorrow. That is a specific example, which is a very monastic context kind of thing. Like, no, you should not stay up until, I don't know what time is it, 12:12, in on your knees in constant prayer, because then you won't be able to wake up for Vespers, right? Or
And I would actually
you get the idea.
agree with him on that, because I don't think it's either or.
Yeah.
I can worship God by going to sleep.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and if we are in union with Christ's sacrifice in the Eucharist as church,
Yeah.
the Eucharist. So just get just a touch on this for a second, because it's worth pointing out that we can offer up our prayers, works, pleasures, sufferings, and sacrifices to God as a sacrifice. Romans 12 talks about that. We are offering ourselves and our actions up to God as a sacrifice. And if my duty is to be sleeping right now, then I can offer that to God and go to sleep. So I think that there. But I get where you're pointing. If spending time on my knees in prayer is taking away from my duty to be sleeping right now, then I am doing something wrong by praying, even though prayer is an objective good. He's right on that part.
So, okay, there's, on a comparison on the same note, I really want to say yes to question one. Was it objectively worth it? That I want to say that yes, this was a heroic thing for Charlie to have done. Just setting aside specific vocation, right? I want to say that this was a heroic thing, and I lean towards still saying yes there. And then therefore the answer to question 3, right, would I, is a matter of, do I have the courage to do that? Do I have the courage to say yes to that? And I don't know if I do. I don't think I do. But that's my fault, right? That's not the situation.
Yeah.
But I would go a little further to say that I've always thought that, for example, soldiery, going to war, was a bachelor's game. That is a task to be done by single unmarried men. Maybe with prospects,
I generally agree.
But if you are a parent going to war, it better be existential. If there is not an absolute existential threat to not just your nation, but your family in particular, you should not be doing that. Part of that is
Mel Gibson, the Patriot.
Yeah,
right. Unless it's the Air Force, where you're just in an office even during war.
Okay, that doesn't count though. Like, if you ask any of the other branches, they know that doesn't count. Okay, so.
What did Len say?
If you're just sitting in a chair in the Air Force, then
yeah. Oh yeah. I know guys who fly drones. It's like, there's no risk there to fight in that war. But,
see, there we go. There's a good warfare job for people who can't afford to risk their lives. But okay, but the point I was getting at this is, I don't know, should we add going out and giving political speeches to that list of occupations that are a bachelor's game? Because that's a dark place for us to go socially.
Oh, it's
almost a contradictory one, right? Because also, like, and a lot of people have said this, and I think that's probably right, that having a family gives you a kind of insight on a lot of these matters that you should have, if you're going to be out there speaking and giving wisdom, right? And if it's impossible or irresponsible to deliver that wisdom as a family man, as a father, with those obligations, then what do we do?
Would I be
Yeah.
correct in saying that for most of Catholic history, it was single people that were evangelizing, but it was, priests and, that
Yeah,
kind of thing?
you
Yeah,
make a good point, man.
maybe that's why.
Like the Jesuits that would go to Japan, it's like these people were going to
Yeah.
be tortured and
Yeah,
die doing this, but they were all single men able to. And there's something to that, that historically missionary work to dangerous places has been done by single men. And I think that's generally the right thing. I
I
don't
would
want to
even go
say it's
further as to
always the right
say
thing.
that it was done by men who were ordained, and that means committed to the church specifically, committed to God, rather than to marriage. I think
How many
that's
how
even
many
further.
lay married evangelist martyrs do we have? I can't think of any. Not
There,
who are declared saints. I mean,
there.
I can think of like Nate
Um,
Saint in Protestantism was
Um,
a martyr, but yeah, that's he wasn't Catholic. I mean, how
there
many
might
times does the
be.
Catholic Church
St.
reckon
Thomas,
Yeah,
to?
Oh, wait, no, Evangelist. No, okay, never mind.
Well, yeah, okay. So Saint Thomas More is actually he's actually very relevant. Actually,
yeah,
good you bring him up because he was a
yeah,
he was a Catholic who stood against the politics of the day
yeah.
for his faith and who was beheaded for it and lost his family and lost his ability to be a father. Now, I would say one point that's important to mention though with him, for one, he stayed silent. He didn't speak. He just stayed silent. So he didn't
Yeah.
speak out. He simply refused to speak in favor of sin, and that's what got him killed. So he was refusing to do evil, which is very different from refusing to do good.
Yeah.
It may be a good thing to give all my money to the poor, but if that means I can't feed my family, it becomes a bad thing.
Mhm.
So like, in the same way, like it may have been good for him to speak out, but if that meant he lost his family, that would have been a bad thing. So him staying silent wasn't necessarily bad. But so that was his one important point. He wasn't speaking out to Charlie Kirk, but also his children were grown up and they were married and they had families to take care of. He's no longer obliged to take care of his daughter like he was
Right.
when she was a little girl. Now his wife still needed him to some degree, but there was a much different dynamic there with his family structure. But just the same, I think he wasn't speaking out, so that's not quite parallel.
It's relevantly similar though. And I think it provides
It is.
a good insight.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting, and it does. It's probably the closest comparison I can think of to a married Catholic saint with children who died for doing something either evangelistic or adjacent to politics. Um, unless someone else. Oh, you know what?
You can,
What's his name? I got one. I got one. Hang on. Hang on.
I'm thinking of
Uh,
someone. I can't remember who it was though. I think there might be one example, one or two examples, something like that. But
no, I got one. I got
you do?
definite one. Hang
Okay.
on. Yeah, yeah. Hang on.
Not Peter, was it?
I love this movie. It's called A Hidden Life, and it is
Hmm.
about uh, Franz Jägerstatter. Um, and he
I would never
is
hear.
a
I've never heard of the movie
Catholic.
nor him.
Oh, it's one of my favorite movies. You should
Oh,
absolutely watch it. I've watched it probably a half dozen times. It
okay.
only came out a few years ago. It is phenomenal. You absolutely should
Hmm.
watch it. But he was a World War II conscriptee to the German army, and he did not feel he could, as a Catholic, uh, swear fealty to Hitler, and did
Ah, I
not feel
see.
he was able to he did not feel he was able to serve in the German army even as a medic because he would have to swear fealty to Hitler. And so he was executed for his refusal, and he is considered a martyr, and he is a saint to the Catholic Church. So yes, and he was married with small children. He was married with small
Okay.
children.
There you go.
But again, he was not speaking out against Hitler. He was refusing to speak up for Hitler, and that is
Right.
why he died. So again,
So
it's
still
more
not quite a
parallel to
good.
Thomas More.
It's not perfect. Not a perfect parallel. Interesting.
Yeah,
Even like I'll even say a lot of even the cases of like white martyrdom that we find, people who are persecuted but not killed. Most often it's it's for non-malfeasance rather than for beneficence, so to speak. It's for refusing to do wrong rather than for actively doing good, which makes an
And just to be
interesting
clear,
difference.
so sometimes refusing to speak up can be a sin,
True.
but not always. It does depend. It really does depend. There's times where
Well,
one needs to
right.
speak out. There's times where one needs to shut up.
Yeah, that's why I
And it's
phrased it as
not.
non-malfeasance, right? By
Yeah.
by
No, I know.
refraining from sin in
Much for
particular, right? Rather than refraining from
any
speaking, I say refraining from
viewer.
sin.
Yeah. No, not so much responding. It's just hypothetically thinking of an objection a viewer might have. Well,
Yeah.
not speaking up can be a sin sometimes, and that's true, but it's not always a sin. Sometimes something that would be good to say is not the right time. There's a time and place. It's like Ecclesiastes says, there is a time for everything under the sun. Sometimes we speak up, sometimes we don't. And it depends, on the context. And there is a hierarchy of goods, and sometimes something that's good isn't as good as something else that's good. That is a higher obligation to us as in our current state in life.
Okay. Having wrapped all of this together in the mind a little bit, I think I have to settle on something like that. The Charlie Kirk speaking out for the truth and for the faith and for Christ was probably something like a supererogatory good. That is to say, it was non-obligatory. Right? A supererogatory good is a good, so it's a genuine good, even all things considered. It is a good thing to do, and it is even, we can even say it is as good or better than alternatives. So it's not one of those things where, yeah, it's a good thing, but you should be doing something else. It's not like that. It is a genuine good. I do think that he was doing the right thing, or at least a right thing. But it is importantly, a supererogatory good is one which is non-obligatory. You would not be wrong not to. Unless he did genuinely have a specific calling from God.
Right.
And I do think, though, still, with it being a supererogatory good, I have to think that it was worth it. I have to think that being this voice crying out in the wilderness is such a good, on such a scale, that I think that it still was a noble and courageous and even heroic sacrifice. That's a hard thing to say, but I think it is.
I'm definitely in the middle on this one. I think that on the one hand, we are called to evangelize, and we could always die from that. So there's always a chance that telling your neighbor about Christ could get you killed. So, does that mean we shouldn't do it? Well, the chance is relatively small. So, yes, we should do it, and it's usually not a question. But then when it becomes a high chance or a certain chance that you die for doing this, and you won't be effective in that case, especially, that person won't be saved, let's say, by it. Well, your obligations to your family first, because you're also obliged to teach them the gospel. So if it's a choice between teaching your son or daughter the gospel or a stranger who will kill you and not receive it, well, then do your son or daughter.
Yeah.
But again, it's like we don't really know. We don't know. There's so much. There's so many factors here. I think it's impossible to really come to a firm answer.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Now, okay, two things. One little way of thinking about this, and then I want to move on to another topic which is closely related, especially to what we're just talking about now. But the one little aside is I really, really like the approach to opposition, to threats, to martyrdom, even that is typified by two people. One of whom is definitely a saint. The other one I like to think is the one that's definitely a saint is St. Rostinus of Soissons, who is my patron, the patron saint of invincibility and undermining the plots of one's enemies, which is really cool patronage. But he took the route of just doing it. He was opposed by a pagan king in what was then Gaul, and he essentially wound up establishing parishes, monasteries, convents, all through just basically doing it and then convincing the king not to put him to death for a long life. And this is, I think, what this reminds me of as a philosopher is Socrates. That, well, yes, fine, they did eventually kill him, but and also for speaking out and speaking the truth, which relevant similarity. But then earlier in Socrates' life, and this is a story he recounts in, I think it's the Apology. Could be wrong. I think it's the Apology though. How during the reign of the 30 tyrants in Athens, he was commanded to, at one point, to support them in arresting some innocent people, basically, who are political subversives. Right? And he was approached on the street, and he was commanded, "You need to go here and do this thing." And he knew that, well, he shouldn't do that. And so what did he do? He said, "Okay," and he kept going the way he was going, and completely ignored the order. And then he lived another 30 years because he just did what he knew he had to do. And he didn't actively oppose anybody. He didn't, go up and fight the guy who was working for the tyrants who had told him to do this. No, he just didn't do it. He did not obey. I really, really like and admire and try to emulate that kind of opposition to evil. Right? And I think, in maybe a professional or an academic context, you're told to do something that you shouldn't do. Just don't do it. They can make you, maybe. They can punish you, maybe. Maybe they won't. Make them do it. Make them make you. I think that is... I think that's a powerful way of standing in opposition to evil. Is to do what Christ did, right? Force it to expend itself upon you. If it is to do so, make them make the first move. And that's,
I agree with that.
That's something that I did, I'll say, during COVID, with a lot of the absurd policies and things. I wish I'd done more. Oh, I wish I'd done a lot more. Let me say, I feel tremendously guilty about a lot of the stuff I went along with through that, even though I knew it was ridiculous from the start. But the things that I got away with by just ignoring things. Did things anyway.
Yeah. No, I was very much one of those people who was pushing the limits. I made them make me wear a mask, and then I'd constantly take it off and make them tell me every time. I remember I was at the hospital with my when my first one was born, and every time I walked out into the hallways, they tell me to put a mask on, and I'd say, "Oh, can you get me one?" I'd make them get me one.
Yeah.
I would actually make them go get me one. They'd get me one.
Good.
I'd put it on. I'd walk out of the building. I'd throw it out and come back without a mask on. They'd say, "Where's your mask?" I put it on. "Oh, I don't have it. Can you get me one?" And they eventually stopped asking me. They got so tired because they knew if I said that, if they asked me for it, they'd say, I'd say, "Get me one then." And they would always go get me one. They realized if they tell me to wear a mask, they're gonna have to get it for me. And they didn't want to do that, so they stopped asking me. So eventually, by the time I left with my daughter, I wasn't wearing a mask the whole time I was walking around. And
very good.
Just pushing those limits and just constantly making my work, the place I worked as well, I made them really work for it. I eventually got a doctor's and I didn't have to wear one, and then I really stuck it to people that way. but
I also eventually I wound up getting one of those the fake mask. You remember?
Oh yes, I did too. I did too. Because there are some places you cannot get away with it. Yeah. There were a few places you could not get away with it, so the fake mask helped a lot.
I did it. I did it a couple of for a while teaching. Including, I have one of my lectures, which you can find a version of this on my channel, where I'm teaching Aquinas' 5 ways, and I was teaching the difference between per se and per accidens causality, which not for this, not for right now, but it involved lighting a candle, right? And it eventually involved blowing out a candle, and so instead of doing anything reasonable, I just threw the mask, and I got a couple of looks like, what? Which that was funny.
That's funny.
Anyway,
that's funny.
The other point,
you got to include that in the edits for this one.
I don't have a recording of that in particular. I have a recording of of that lecture from a previous class back when we could show our faces.
I still have my fake masks, by the way. I still have like 3 or 4 of those.
I don't know where to put it.
I saved those because it's watchable. You never know when they're going to bring another fake pandemic to
any day.
Any day.
It was okay. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is maybe we can wrap on this, is this has to do with, so we ask if it was worth it for Charlie to have done all this, and was his sacrifice worth it? What was it for? Well, we can look now in retrospect, and Len brought this up. that we can look now to the sort of revival that this might be bringing, or we can, so far seems to be, and we can hope this will keep bringing to the faith. And Len, do you want to start us off on this, and then we'll talk about this for a little bit and then wrap up. Yeah?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so you could definitely see it just with like all the comments of people that and just anecdotal. We don't know if they are or not, but like there's a lot of people that just suddenly were like, I'm going back to church. And another thing too, I was kind of interesting to me was the thought that like Charlie Kirk is kind of like is the like other than like maybe Billy Graham, it's like the closest thing that Protestant, especially evangelicals, have to like a saint. And I as for like a revival, so I think there's a lot of things that this is going to bring to Christianity in general, but like to Protestants, it's going to create like a big Christian revival. They're gonna, and I think the interesting thing is that they're gonna, without even knowing it, kind of see the Catholic position on saints, why they're important, what they do to the faith, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there's something to that, and I see Protestants who were, already serious about the faith, but now they're saying like they're looking at Charlie as like the whole "I am Charlie Kirk" movement now, where people are saying that, and they're looking to him as an inspiration. Which a year ago you say, "Oh, I look to Mary, I look to Joseph, or I look to this X, Y, or Z saint as an inspiration, as someone I can live up to," and they'd say, "Why don't you just live up to Jesus?" Well, yeah, I'm living up to
Right,
Jesus
exactly.
as well, but this
Yeah,
is an
okay,
example
sure.
of someone who lived up to Jesus in a way that was contextually like my own life. So
Maybe you know the chapter and verse better than I do, but didn't St. Paul say, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ"? That's what we're called to
I
do.
always quote that verse. Yeah,
Yeah.
he said that multiple times. I believe he said it twice. I believe there's two verses
Okay.
that say that.
Yeah.
But yes, he definitely said it at least once, and I do point that out to Protestants. But in fact, funnily enough, I've never gotten a response from Protestants who say, Paul never said to imitate him, only to Jesus. When I quote that verse, that's where the conversation always stops. They never actually respond to it. But regardless, I think a lot of Protestants are suddenly seeing the value of looking to someone who lived saintly in this day and age and saying, okay, yes, I want to be like Jesus, but Jesus didn't have television and YouTube and Facebook. So it's hard for me sometimes to see how would Jesus act on these things. And when you see it, you see someone is behaving, you think, oh, wow, he's being really Christ-like on Facebook, on YouTube, in these public debates. That's what it would look like. And now we can say, okay, that's what Christ would look like in this context. And I might not be able to see Jesus literally in that context in Scripture, but I can see Jesus working through him in that context and say, that is how Christ would live, and I can live up to his role model, or his I can live up to his example as someone living Christ-like in that context. And that's what we do with the saints. When I look to, I have a particular blessed I like a lot, or venerable actually, Paulo Perazzo, who I look up to quite a bit, and he's an inspiration to me. He was a working man. He's a guy who lived Christ in the context of being a layperson who worked a full-time job, and he's a very relatively recent person. So we can look up to someone like that and say, okay, he's kind of a similar context to what I'm in my modern world. And so I can look to him and say, okay, how would Christ live in this context? Well, here's someone who lived Christ-like in a similar context, and I can go up to that. So that's why we look to saints. And I think Protestants are starting to see that, like you said, Len, in the case of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I think it's going to really help bring a lot of people. I mean, just the fact that he died brought a lot of people in, but like, yeah, I think they're going to see the power of sainthood, and that's going to bring a lot of people either back to the faith or even to the faith. I think also
Open
like
to the faith,
bring people.
open that aspect of the faith.
Yeah.
I think also.
Are you guys familiar with the first and the second Great Awakening?
Yeah, I am at least.
So
Vaguely. I don't know I couldn't tell you the years or anything, but One was
First Great
one
Awakening
was
happened.
the 18th century, one was the 19th century. It's the best I got.
Correct. Yeah. So the first George Whitefield was one of the big names. Charles Wesley from the First Great Awakening. The other Wesley as well. Charles Wesley and who's the other Wesley?
Wasn't
There's
Daniel,
two
was it?
Wesleys. They're
No, probably
brothers.
Webster.
No, Webster's different.
No.
Similar period, but different. But yeah, they were famous speakers. Basically, they went to America. Now, America, prior to the First Great Awakening, was known for homosexual sin. It was known for just basically lawless pirates. Like the way Americans were living was quite lawless. And George Whitefield and others like him, like the Wesleys, came to America and were preaching the faith and saying, "Y'all need to repent. Like, turn around. Like, this is not the way to life. You're going to hell." And there was a massive. It was a revival. Revival's not really something we have in Catholic context. We don't talk about revivals, but
It was the big
for
tent
Protestant
revival
general,
movements, basically.
what I mean, it was big tent revival, but it wasn't just big tent revival for like, because Protestants have revivals all the time that only cover like a township, if that. It's one church having a quote unquote revival. This was like legit, like it covered the entire country type of revival, where the entirety of the country was like, or it wasn't a country back then, but the colonies were all involved in this Great Awakening. People were en masse turning back to Christ. And having profound encounters with Jesus, and that was leading right up to the American Civil War of Secession from Great Britain, where this moral revival preceded this war of secession for independence, and the same thing happened in the 19th century, just before the Second Civil War, with the North and the South. So it does seem. I'm not saying it needs necessarily to lead to a civil war. I'm not. And that's not what I'm saying. I mean, it definitely could. Let's hope not. But I think it definitely could lead to a third Great Awakening, and I think that's something I've been praying for, and I think we should all pray for a third Great Awakening. A Catholic Great Awakening is a third. If it was Catholic, it'd be even better. But but they were massive. The Great Awakenings were two very pivotal events for American history, because they were mass turning arounds of the masses from living not up to the standards of the Christian life and turning back to God, repenting. They weren't necessarily becoming Catholic, but they were turning back to God, repenting as best they knew how. And it changed the nation both times, or changed the continent both times, or the colonies.
And they both came at times of great turmoil, and they both came at times of great debauchery, I guess you'd say.
Times of darkness, dark times, and both of them led to, and yes, dark times. The dark times continued because both led to a civil war. But they brought about a good thing that changed the nation for the better.
They sparked hope too.
And hopefully we can have a third Great Awakening without a third civil war. But even putting whether or not to be a civil war aside, I think this could be a third Great Awakening. I think we might be finally seeing the beginnings of a third Great Awakening. It would be great to see that.
We're overdue for one, certainly. I mean, if you think about it, we want to say, middle of the 18th century, middle of the 19th century. Well, we sure could have used one in the middle of the 20th century, but instead we kind of went the other direction, didn't we?
Yeah. The closest in the 20th century was the Azusa Street revival, which did go across the country, and that's when the charismatic gifts came back for Protestants, because Protestants had pretty much lost the charismatic gifts after they broke off from the Catholic Church, and after Azusa Street they came back, and that led to the Welsh revival as well, where whole football stadiums were emptying out. So we're piling up, not with football players, but for evangelism. But
we also, I mean, I have to say, I think that also not the civil rights movement per se, but the social movements that surrounded it really, I think, took that same energy and went in a secular political direction with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why we missed out on it. And, here, I think, by contrast,
the sexual revolution.
We had the sexual revolution. We had the various the issues surrounding economics, the issues surrounding race, the issues surrounding feminism. All of these social issues became a kind of central to the civic religion. And I think that maybe here we're getting something where
and good.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and just for clarification for the audience, I know you're not saying that civil rights was bad, just
Right.
that we moved away from the 20th century was less about these great revivals back to God, turning back to God, and more about political causes, some of which were
Secular.
good, some of which were bad.
Yes. Well, okay, I mentioned that civic religion. Here's one of those things where I'm glad you're here to stop me from just yammering on, because when I talk about American civil religion, I'm talking about something really specific here. Link in the description. I have an article on the matter. Because
Yeah.
it's a thing that I kind of rail against often. This
Well,
this
it's
this
the heresy of
replacement
Americanism.
yes, right. But in the academic context, it's typically referred to as the civic religion of the United States,
Yeah.
which is a kind of politicization of the spiritual, an immanentization of the transcendent, and so it's a shift of focus from the divine and transferring those sorts of energies into the temporal and the political and the particular. And
Yeah, I've read a
it's a
few
problem
articles.
we have.
I may have read your article as well.
Maybe.
But yeah, I mean, I've heard. I just heard a video about that was kind of like the boomers were the ones who really turned their attention. They turned away from God towards the government. Government kind of replaced God for the boomer generation.
I should make a
And
video
I think
of that article. Really should.
What that?
I should make a video based on that article. I really should. But
Yeah, I thought I saw something from you, but I've definitely read articles and watched videos that talk about the American civil religion before. I thought it was something from you, but maybe someone else. But yeah, I would definitely agree with that. There was a shifting away from God towards government in the 20th century, and the government, especially for the boomer generation, really became the substitute for God.
And I think that
You served the third great awakening that would have happened in the 20th century.
Len, what were you saying? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, it usurped the third great awakening that would have happened in the middle of the 20th century.
Yeah. I mean, hey, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, and I will say this is something that struck me that is unique, maybe about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, as opposed to a lot of the sorts of political violence that we see and have historically seen, is that this is something that I clipped. I talked about on a live stream last week, which maybe you've seen that that clip I had, but what really struck me about this, and especially since our last conversation, is that Charlie was not. He was not a reasonable. That's not right. He was not your ordinary target for assassination. He was just some guy. Right? He was a guy who said stuff. Maybe stuff that a lot of people didn't like. But he was not politically connected. He had no power in the political sense. He'd done nothing to anyone aside from saying things. And we haven't seen that since Martin Luther King Jr. Someone being murdered of political prominence who was not in politics, who was not a politician, who was not a public servant or whatever, if you want to call it that. Nothing like that. He was just some guy.
The one guy from the Beatles as well.
Who was that?
The one guy from the Beatles as well.
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. I can grant that. Okay, that actually, because I was going to make another contrast point, which was that, well, as far as we know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated also by just some guy, unlike Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated by the FBI, which is, I mean, that's a big difference, right?
Right.
I'm
only like which
5%
killed him, but I would definitely agree, probably the government.
I think there's good evidence that it was the FBI, but
I haven't looked that closely. But I've definitely seen some of the evidence on that, and I definitely think it's very plausible.
It's quite strong. Now this particular point may age like milk if and when we find out that the FBI killed Charlie Kirk too. I don't think that's true.
Right.
But who knows? But the point though is that this is one of those things where it represents something very different from what we might expect in terms of political violence, which is that politics, that is the interplay of power between people with power and authority and control and the levers of the state, violence between those people, we can kind of expect. We can kind of move on from that. We can kind of almost accept it. But violence between just some guy and just some other guy, because the one guy said something that the other guy didn't like, especially at this level, I think that's something that's going to hit a lot of people much harder. And that's the kind of thing that can get people to change something. Change the way we look at politics, at least.
That kind of explains when I first heard that he was shot, I just had a weird feeling inside, and I think that's probably part of it, a large part of it. It's just because like if it had, when Trump was almost assassinated, had he been assassinated, it wouldn't have been the same feeling as when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, because he's president. And you kind of just sort of,
well,
that kind of thing.
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. When I heard that Trump was shot, that's all I heard. Because I just I was at work. I opened my phone and saw in one of my group chats somebody was talking about how Trump got shot in the head. I was like, what? But at that point, my shock was more like, oh, what's going to happen? Not, oh no, that's terrible. That came later. I was thinking that, no, that's awful. But my initial thought is, oh, the political ramifications of this are going to be dramatic. But that was before I knew he'd survived. Whereas for Charlie Kirk, I heard he was shot sometime before I learned that he died. I thought he might have survived. I didn't know. It was a mystery to me, it was for most people for quite some time, for at least a few hours. But immediately I was like, oh, this is, wow, that's there's something about it that dug at me. And I think that's it. I think the big thing is that Charlie Kirk is not Donald Trump. Charlie Kirk is just, us. The guy who talks.
Yeah. There is
he's not a guy who bombs people.
Bishop Barron had a video. He gave some kind of homily or sermon or something recently that I saw that kind of expressed that pretty well. That he's just like a normal guy like us, and part of the reason why it really affects everybody is that it's just personal, and it's kind of just sort of fundamental to, being able to speak truth is just real fundamental, and so it's almost like this fundamental part of ourselves kind of got shot there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a gamer. He was just a regular dude, a family man. You watch the videos of him. He's a pretty normal guy with his family and everything. So yeah, for sure, it definitely hits different than someone like Trump.
Yeah, and it's with the whole distinction between somebody who's in politics, it's way harder for us to relate to somebody in politics who, like you said, carries power. They have, politics is, kind of the government itself is like a monopoly on power, and we have no idea what it's like to wield that at all.
And further, they're already in the business of violence, and I think there's something about that we kind of intrinsically recognize, even if it's kind of more of a libertarian point to explicitly recognize it. I think everybody kind of implicitly gets that, right? Yeah, no.
Donald Trump. It's just like in a war, if soldiers kill soldiers, we kind of sort of figure that, I
mean, it's still tragic, but it's not unexpected.
Civilians.
Yeah, it's tragic, but it's not a war crime. It's not unexpected.
Whereas, I did bring up the quote this time because we talked about this last time, and
okay,
about all sides agree that political force or the politics is violence, and I had the two quotes on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Is Mao Zedong, the communist revolutionary from China, he said political power comes from the power of a gun, which is it's force, it's violence. And then George Washington said something similar: government is not reason, it is not eloquent, it is force, like fire, a dangerous servant and a fearful master. So you have both sides of the spectrum. When they're reasonable people recognize government is violence. It is a monopoly on violence, and it can be used for great evil. Theoretically, it can be used for great good, but I think we would mostly disagree with that as libertarians. But but it is violence. It is a monopoly on violence. And whether or not you can use the ring of power for good, that's debated by some. But
don't take the
but
Boromir
it's
position.
definitely violent. It's what?
Don't take the Boromir position.
Yeah,
No,
I take the throw it in the fire position.
Yes, absolutely. But I think, okay, so I think we can maybe end on this because I think this is a great point, that realization that that government is violence is something that we can draw people's attention to here. Because I do genuinely think that most people had this same deep gut response to Charlie's assassination because because he wasn't in politics. He wasn't in the business of violence. But people don't quite realize that's why. I think we can make people realize that. I think that it's easy enough to show people, like, okay, yes, fine. When Donald Trump got shot, that would have terrible political ramifications. Yes, he is a beloved child of God and did not deserve that. Also, it's the same thing that he does. It's his business now. It didn't used to be, but it is now. Right? He bombs people. He arrests people. He has people killed. That's what politicians do. Right? And so when a politician dies, and when a politician is killed by violence, sure, it shouldn't happen. It almost never should happen. But
it's comparable to civilian death versus military. In war,
very much so.
It's sadder to see civilians get killed in war than it is to see combatants die in war.
Very
Not that both aren't tragedies, but the people who sign up to fight sign up to fight. The people who are innocent bystanders are innocent bystanders. So you tend to, I think it's very natural for people to tend to mourn the loss of civilians more than the loss. And politicians aren't civilians. They are on paper, constitutionally speaking, but like when it comes down to it, they're not civilians.
Another note on this: I think they often, too often, think of themselves as civilians. They don't even always realize that what they do is violence. I mean, some of the brighter ones on the relatively good side and on the relatively evil side, some of the smarter ones do realize that, but a lot of them don't get that. Like AOC, I don't think she realizes that politics involves hurting people. I really don't think she gets that. Just a hunch. I don't know.
Or just think back to like when Rand Paul was trying to explain to everybody that that making healthcare a right involves, you basically, forcing somebody to do something at the point of a gun and basically enslaving somebody to do work.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, when you make something that a right. I had this conversation with someone not too long ago. Yeah, they said that water is right because humans need it. It's an easy answer. I'm like, well, no, like either someone owes it to you, or you can forcibly take it from someone, or who are you going to enslave to get it for you? Who can you forcibly take it from that needs it themselves? These are like you can't just say it's a right because you need it. You can need things without it being a right.
And how much? Always a great one that really gets them. Is a lot of people who think X or Y is a right have no concept of marginal utility either. So you can really hit them with the Hayek angle too. But anyway, all right. It's getting late for us, so I think we're gonna
1 a.m.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. So, anyway, thank you, viewers, for watching this one, for sticking with us on this one. I think this was another great conversation. Thank you guys for joining me on it.
Yeah,
it was fun. Good to have you join us this time, Len.
Yeah.
I had blast both you guys, but we should definitely do a three-way sometime again, and maybe find some more issues to talk about. Animal Afterlife.
Oh yeah, there's so many. Just in our conversation now, there's so many.
Judas, monergism. That's my list already. So.
Martyrdom is one I'd like to talk about as well. Yeah, for sure. So these just some teasers for some future potential episodes. If you see all of us together, we'll be talking about monergism, maybe Animal Afterlife, and what was that one you just said, Len?
Did I say one?
I said
you made
Judas.
a good point. Judas, yeah, you said Judas, yeah.
Which maybe you guys said that because I don't have as hard a view on that.
Another good one though is Catholic Charismatics.
Oh, I'd love to talk about charismatic gifts. Yeah, because
I will watch that one because I
I'm
know
very
very little
strongly in
about
the
it.
camp of because I get continued. I also believe in the gift of tongues, as Protestants generally believe in it.
Hmm.
So, that's a controversial one. But I think the way the scriptures talk about it, that's what it's saying. It has to be. I think that the way that people like the type of tongues that are often counter to glossolalia that other people talk about also is real, but there's a couple different kinds of tongues, and they're all in scripture.
Yeah.
Yeah, another episode. Another episode.
Yeah, it
Well,
was
looking
another good
forward to it.
episode.
So,
Right.
thanks for all for joining us, and that's it for me at least.
Likewise.
All right.
Have a good night,
Sounds good.
everybody.